Okay, it's time to get technical. We're going to look at how to set up your session properly, background noise, EQ, compression, and limiting. With any podcast job, they're the really key things to know how to use properly and the settings and the do's and don'ts. So we're going to run through all of that. But first, how to set up your session correctly. When you open Adobe Audition and you go File, New, Multi-track Session, you're presented with some options which can be confusing, but they're actually really simple. Obviously, your name, we're going to put in training. You're going to put where you want your location of your session to go. Template is great if we set up a template, and maybe that's something we'll look at in the future, but for the moment, we're going to hit none. Then you're presented with sample rate, bit depth, and master. Master will always be stereo. Sample rate and bit depth are probably the ones that you kind of need to know why we set them at a certain level. And what we set them at is exactly what's here, 48,016. But let me explain why. Firstly, sample rate. Think of it as setting the boundaries for your audio. Know that in setting those boundaries, though, it will affect the pitch of your audio or the frequencies the human ear will be able to hear in that session. Let me show you what I mean. Here's an EQ which represents it really well. So the human ear can hear between 20 Hz all the way up to 20 kilohertz. The lower the sample rate, the less capacity your session has to reproduce high-end frequencies. So for example, if we set a sample rate of, let's go 32. If you set a sample rate of 32, the highest frequency that will be heard is actually only 14.5 kilohertz, which sits up here. The EQ is showing us our lows, our mids, and our highs. So what we're doing there is reducing the highs that can be heard in your session. A sample rate of 44,000 bumps that right up to 20 kilohertz, which is there. Remembering that's where the human ear can hear. But a sample rate of 48,000 bumps it up to 21.8 kilohertz. And it includes frequencies we can't hear, but we can feel or sense them in our overall mix. That's why that is an industry standard for producing professional audio, 48,000. And you'll be able to just do that every time. Bit depth this does not equal quality like the sample rate does. Where sample rate controls the pitch, bit rate talks about the bits of information stored in the amplitude of audio. Stay with me. Here's a piece of audio. And I'm going to use this as our intro for today. Now, if you zoom in that, and keep zooming, and now we're really zooming, right? You can see that when you get down to the nitty-gritties, your wave is just a bunch of little bits of information all tied together. Now, the industry standard for bit rate is really simple because 16 bits is the number needed to perfectly reproduce any piece of music. Anything higher than that moves on to, if you're making a film or anything higher than 16 bits, you're not even going to notice the difference. So for all your sessions, go File, New, Multi-track Session, 48 and 16. Let's move on to background noise. And this is a big one, Monica, especially with podcast editing, because they're being recorded in a lot of different areas, and some people have really great mic technique. Your guest might not have great mic technique. And it can be the biggest thing when you first receive audio as a podcast editor. You go, oh my goodness, like, do they record in a tunnel? Or there's air conditioning problems. Maybe you have to get rid of a door noise. There's a range of things that come into background noise, but I want to show you the simplest one. First, we're going to import some audio. I've got a copy of the tracks you sent me, which was great. Thanks for sending them through. we're going to open up one of those tracks. Let it load. Okay, here we are.
That when they actually ask a simple question, tell us about yourself.
So this is a guest, and already you can hear the background noise. And side note, you can probably hear a lot of background noise with my microphone I'm using. That's just so I can be hands-free. I just have a simple lapel mic. Back to our guest.
Values. It
You
aligns.
can hear it's like a real room noise. And the first thing you want to do when you're trying to treat background noise is find your noise print. It's often just before they answer a question, they can say like they did in this instance. And there you can see we've got a really good representation of just the background noise, no talking. I go Control click, and you can go Capture Noise Print. Then we're going to go File, Effects, Noise Reduction, Noise Reduction Process. Now this looks super confusing, but it's actually not. The noise reduction slider tells us how hard it's going to work at removing background noise. The reduce by tells us how much it's going to reduce it by. And then the other important thing is this output noise only. If you click that, it's going to show us exactly what we're removing. Now this is all trial by fire. You just have to have a play with this to get the best results. The thing I'm thinking about, and I'm just going to give you a real example and talk it through actually. So you're going to select all your audio and then hit play.
So use your headphones to guide you.
So if we bring this all the way down, you can hear that background noise is in there. 100%. It's taking the noise out, but it's also giving you like this digital kind of artificial noise. You can also select the bit you want to hear and then hit play. Let's have a listen to our guest.
Tried 1 year of being a golf pro, realised that I wasn't as good as what I thought I was, and gave up that dream, and then got tapped on the shoulder to begin a career with Village doing management of cinema.
So what happens with background noise is, yes, it sounds like it's taking it all out, but in between, like when they're breathing,
Village doing...
that's where it can sound really digital, this artificial noise if you're not careful. So let's press play.
Village doing management of cinemas, which tied into my university career, which was...
Let's go again.
With Village doing...
I find it works really well around the 80% mark. And then in terms of how much you want to take it out,
a number of areas where we connected and very much enjoyed each other's company. So Aaron, welcome.
So again,
thank you.
That's leaving it all in. It's being really quite dramatic.
I actually found out that I'm really hopeless at doing this. And I found out about it
So somewhere in the middle there is really good. And again, you have to listen. If you're finding it is digital, bring down your noise reduction a bit. Then to hear what you're actually taking out, you tick output noise and hit play. You can see we're taking out a fair bit of his voice there. So you want to find a balance. I'm really happy with that.
And one that's kind of started off in a butcher shop in Heathmont, which is a suburb miles away, doing dishwashing and all that kind of stuff.
So you can see there, when I ticked output noise, I could hear I was taking a bit too much of his voice out. And you don't want to do that, so I've brought that down. So in this instance, 64% works and 20 dB works well. Then we go ahead and I should have closed that. We're going to reduce that. Apply and watch the magic happens. It's quite incredible, and you're with a really great program. So I use Pro Tools. I started off on Adobe Audition, Oop. Hold that train of thought, we've made a mistake. Let's go back to noise reduction. Process. Untick output noise only. And then hit apply. Yeah, so I started off in Adobe Audition. I since moved to Pro Tools. But in the time that I moved to Pro Tools from the time I first started, Adobe Audition has got incredible features and noise reduction is one of them. So you're definitely using the right program. Now let's have a listen to our audio.
And then at 23, after completing university,
you can hear how much cleaner that is. And we'll get to processes later, but you absolutely want to move the background noise first. Okay, now we want to go ahead and do the exact same with our second track. We want to find our noise print, which from memory was around this mark. There it is there. Going to capture noise print. And then we're going to apply that to our audio. Rather take that away from our audio. So noise reduction. Let's have a listen.
And it was...
And those settings are still really great because I'm only taking a little bit of voice out.
legal age where you could go and
but it sounds
get your
really
part-time.
crisp and clear. So we're going to go ahead and apply that. And the biggest thing with removing background noise, Monica, is does it sound good? Does it sound too artificial? And if it does, wind those settings back. Or am I not getting enough of the background noise out? And put those settings up. The key though is, does it sound good at the end? That's the main thing.
My top was inappropriate, and if I would like to
Great, I'm really happy with that. So that is background noise. We're going to move on to the three big things: EQ, compression, and limiting. EQ is how your audio sounds. A compressor is all about keeping your levels consistent. And a limiter, it makes sure there's no hidden surprises for you and your listener. I'm going to open up, here's a finished podcast. This has an intro in it, has an ad, has an outro, it had 2 tracks. But you can see all of the levels are consistent, it sounds great, and there's no hidden surprises. So that's the function of the EQ, a compressor, and a limiter. But let's do a deep dive. So first of all, EQ. The EQ, the best EQ you can use within Adobe Audition is this parametric EQ. Now it goes back to what we were talking about before. The human ear can hear between 20 Hertz, which is really low down here, to 20 kilohertz, which is really high. Low frequencies, each frequency represents a different sound, and I'm going to show you an example of this. And this is something you've probably played with, but it's also probably a good refresher. So low frequencies are down here, and if we increase them, you get more of that bass. If we bring in our tracks, let's actually just listen to Aaron for a second.
can't see it, so we're gonna really
Sorry, whoever the female is. Let's put an EQ on this one. And you can hold it by holding down Option and dropping it in. Let's widen everything up here so we can see what we're doing. Great. Holding Option, dropping that onto the track.
can't see it, so we're gonna really
So high frequencies now. If we adjust,
like we're on the dance.
you can see we're increasing those frequencies.
When you're done, just because I'm going to duck out.
Mhm.
So
Great. So our high frequencies, our low frequencies, and our mids. Now the process of EQing is simply boosting the frequencies that sound nice and getting rid of the frequencies that don't sound great. And you do that all by your ear, but there's also a little helpful thing that I'm going to send you. Let's bring it up in my production Bible. Great, here it is. And here, this is a sheet that describes what is on each frequency. So this is directly relating to the numbers down the bottom. And if we bring that up, you can see bass, low mids, muddy frequencies, honky frequencies, chess, when you hear someone saying ch, and that doesn't sound great, that's where that frequency sits, between 2 and 2.5. You got your sizzles, your sparkling, and your ambience as we get to the full range of what the ear can hear. So like I said, it's just the process of taking out things that don't work and boosting things that do work. And there is a good go-to for that. What you want to do is you want to take off these low basses, because this is where your room noise will sit. And you can do that by hitting HP, which stands for high pass, and that's letting the higher frequencies pass, but not the lower ones. You can slide it like that, but you want to roll that off to about 40 down here. You want to increase, I tend to increase about 2K. That's a really nice frequency, but again, it's how it sounds. So let's play that.
That's fine. I just realised I can use my computer.
Yeah, so aim for 30 minutes because we're going to edit
Yep.
it down to about 25.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Cool.
Okay.
No
Yeah, so
worries.
Sorry, so you're cool with all the technology? It's really
Okay, let's find a bit where we're talking for a bit.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Frank and Fearless, the podcast.
And then the last steps are rolling off the lows, increasing a bit of the highs, and then taking out this middle. Remember back to our guide, were muddy frequencies around 200, 315, which is down here. So we want to take a bit of them down. See how that's 200 there? And I tend to take a bit down there too. This has been my go-to forever. Depending on the voice, if it's a male voice, you might want to adjust different frequencies, but again, it's just what sounds nice, and this is a really good go-to. So feel free to stop down, or I can even screenshot this for you so you know. Compression is the next thing we need to look at. And the best compressor, you go compression, multi-band, tube. Now the great thing with compression is that, again, there's some really key settings that will make it sound great. But first let me explain each function of the compressor and what it's doing. So every piece of audio has a dynamic range, and that's the space between the lowest part of your audio and the highest part of the audio. A compressor controls the dynamic range, or squashes the audio, helps keep things consistent. The threshold, which is this one here, tells the compressor when to start working. Attack tells the compressor how quickly you want the compressor to start working. The ratio tells it how hard to start working, how hard it should work rather. And the release is how long before we get back to our natural audio. Now the settings are great because you can just lock them in. Attack, you want a 40. It's a quick attack. Release, you want 100 because it's going to quickly compress the audio but then put it back to its natural state. A ratio of 2 works really well. And then the only thing you'll need to adjust moving forward is the threshold.
Everyone,
And where you want that to be, you want to go to where the audio is the most consistent.
hello, everyone, and welcome to Frank and Fearless.
I'm just going to turn this output gain down, sorry. And output gain is taking that new compressed signal and putting that back out. Let me explain it. So we're going to play our audio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Frank and Fearless. The
Like I said, you
podcast
want to
for
move that
business
down
leaders with a growth mindset.
till it gets to -6. That's really best practice.
I'm really excited to welcome my inaugural guest to our.
And then the output gain, we're going to put that at 2. That's just boosting the signal because, as you can hear, it's going to reduce it when we compress it. I know this is quite technical, but the takeaway is the settings. And the settings for a compressor are 40, 100, ratio of 2, and then you just adjust your threshold each time. Finally is a limiter. And luckily, Adobe Audition makes it really easy. We've got a hard limiter, We want that to -3. That's all you have to do for a limiter. Remember, this is just catching any audio that goes above your threshold. But Adobe Audition makes it really easy because it's got a preset there that works really well. So that's EQ, compression, and limiting. If you have any other questions on that, let me know. But that concludes the technical. That's just a refresher on what each one does and the best practice for each one. Now we're going to look at the actual steps of bringing it all together.